Hello, my name is Kiwi and welcome to my Pokémon challenge, in which I will be completing the entire Pokédex, but with a twist. I must catch them all in Pokédex order. This is part 3 of an ongoing series, so if you haven't watched the first 2 parts, I would strongly suggest that you check those out first before continuing. The link to the playlist will be in the description below. However, if you just want to jump straight into Gen 3, that's cool too, and therefore I'll do an overview of the rules. I must obtain every single Pokémon in the order that they appear in the National Dex. Once I've obtained one, I am then allowed to move on and catch the next one after it. However, I am allowed to freely obtain any Pokémon as many times as I like after I've gotten it once. For this leg of the challenge, since I've already obtained every Gen 1 and 2 Pokémon, I am freely allowed to catch any of them that appear. But if, for example, a wild Zigzagoon appears before I've reached it, I am not allowed to catch it. Geodudes, Zubats, Abra, Vulpix, and any other old Pokémon that happen to appear here are completely fine though. Contrary to what you may think though, this is not a living dex, and so once a Pokémon is obtained, I no longer need to keep a copy of it, or keep it at all for that matter. I can also use any games in the series, and I can freely hop between them at will, along with being allowed to trade back and forth between them. This can only be done with fresh save files that I created originally as part of this challenge. I can go back to games I've used in previous parts of the challenge to pick up Pokémon if they're easier to obtain there. If I wish to, I can use any side games, peripherals, glitches, events, anything at all other than actual cheating. Though I will only be using these alternative methods if there's no other way to obtain it in a core series game without breaking the chain and catching a Pokémon out of order. If I get a Pokémon in a side game, I won't count it as obtained in the context of this challenge until it has landed in a mainline game or Pokémon Home. So with that said, let's start part 3 of this grand adventure and take a trip to the Hoenn region. Oh, actually, we're not starting in Hoenn. At the end of the last video, I beat Red atop Mount Silver, and as a result, Steven, the Hoenn champion, gives me a Trico. The reason for doing this here was because I was determined not to have to mindlessly grind 3 starters to full at the beginning of new games for the 3rd video in a row. And so, with that in mind, I gave it an EXP share and went to town on the Elite Four a few times, evolving it into Grovyle and then again into Sceptile. I decided that instead of going through a Hoenn game with nothing but a Torchic, I would instead make use of Soul Silver. Last I left off, I had just beaten the 8th gym and then left it there. So upon returning, I did the summoning ritual for Lugia. Then after catching it, I reached the league and beat the Elite Four and the champion. And then decided that in order to finish this ASAP, I would need some help instead of grinding. Therefore, upon reaching Kanto, I headed straight to Fuchsia City, avoiding every optional battle, and entered Pal Park. Then I consolidated my highest level Kanto Pokémon together in Fire Red, Pal Parking them over to Soul Silver in order to remove any semblance of challenge or consume time to get to the end of the game. After catching 5 strong and high leveled Pokémon and also Magcargo for no reason, I then went around doing the normal story stuff. After that, I beat all 8 of the Kanto gym leaders in the order that they would have been fought in the original games. Talking to Oak, I was granted access to Mount Silver, immediately heading to the summit to fight Red. This battle was nowhere near as challenging as before, so after a few minutes I had become the ultimate champion. And then I talked to Steven once again and this time chose Torchic. After getting this, well, you know the procedure by now. EXP share, conquer the Pokemon League, rinse and repeat until Torchic evolves into Combusken and Combusken evolves into Blaziken. Then it was finally time to actually play in Hoenn. I started with Sapphire, but this character's adventure was not going to last very long. Sorry about that, Terry. Picking up Mudkip, I rushed through the start of the game and beat Roxanne, evolving Mudkip into Marshtomp in the process. Heading straight to Granite Cave, I caught myself 6 Gen 1 Pokemon, and this is because this is the first place in which you can actually catch older Pokemon. After doing so, I was able to transfer Marshtomp into Soul Silver, and after catching it in Pal Park, it was a simple case of once again bullying the Elite Four until it gained enough EXP to evolve into Swampert. And with that, I have successfully gotten all fully evolved Hoenn starters without needing to grind solely on one Pokemon for half the game, and without having to release any starters. Starting my new game on Sapphire again, I chose a default name, which is apparently not May, and after entering my bedroom I made sure to set the time to 4 PM. This is very important for later capture due to the internal battery being dead. I chose Mudkip again, but this time I didn't need to do a solo run. Unfortunately I couldn't catch this Poochyena, but after beating my rival I unlocked the ability to catch Pokemon. Poochyena is the rarest Pokemon that you can find at the start of the game, which is irritating, but after a bit of searching, it appeared and I caught it. Beating every trainer and wild encounter along the way using switch training on Poochyena, I reached Petalburg City, and upon entering the gym I was tasked with babysitting Wally while he caught himself a Ralts. After that, I entered Petalburg Woods, and again won every fight, including the one against the Aqua Grunt. I also made sure to pick up this Chestoberry from the flower shop, continued to win battles on Route 104, picked up the HM for Cut from the aptly named Cutter, and then entered Petalburg Gym. Going up against Roxanne for the second time in approximately half an hour, I realised I didn't heal before approaching her and remembered why I have never even attempted a Nuzlocke before. But after entering with an actual healthy team, I swept her and got the badge, also evolving Mudkip. Before I could go any further, there was some story fluff involving getting some parts back and saving a seagull, and as a reward for getting the parts back, the head of Devon did something that no CEO has ever done in history, which is give away free stuff. After getting the Pokénav and picking up these Chestoberries, I went to Mr. Briny's house to sail over to Dewford Town. I entered Granite Cave, which you're going to be seeing too much of in the early part of this run. Got the HM for Flash and grinded on mid-level wild Pokemon with Poochyena, also catching a Zubat and also an Abra for teleport use. After reaching level 18, Poochyena evolved into Mightyena and I could finally get back to catching. Returning to the mainland, I found and caught myself a Zigzagoon, returned to the cave and did more leveling. After getting bored of that, I just decided to go ahead and take on the gym as well, beating all the trainers for EXP and beating Brawly to get the second badge. I moved the story forward by getting to the deepest part of Granite Cave, giving Stephen the letter. And the reason for that was because you get an EXP share as a reward for doing so, which was a very welcome addition. So this helped get Zigzagoon to a high enough level to... oh, I pressed B. Wasted a little bit more time leveling it up again, this time not touching anything, and it evolved into Linoon. I then caught Wurmple and did not evolve it because it has a random chance to evolve into either Silcoon or Cascoon, and if it evolves into Cascoon, this run will be dead. I ran around for ages in Petalburg Woods, the game taunting me with all these mons I can't catch yet, eventually finding and catching Silcoon, and after a relatively short grind it evolved into Beautifly. This time I was allowed to catch Cascoon, and after doing so I got it to level 10 and evolved it into Dustox. Next was Lotad, a Sapphire exclusive, and after that I caught Jigglypuff in Heart Gold, Growlithe, Oddish from Pal Park, hatched a Pichu and Marill. Well, I needed these to get some more evolution stones. Bill's granddad in Sea Cottage will ask for them and I will be needing stones soon, and so he handed them all over. You see, I found out that you only get a water stone in the abandoned ship in Hoenn, in an area that requires dive. Using dive outside of battle requires the 7th badge, and there was no way I was going all that way without any new Pokemon. So I sent Lotad to Pal Park, evolved it into Lombre, then gave it a water stone to evolve it into Ludicolo. Time had now come to start playing Ruby. I gave myself one of the default names, chose Torchic this time, and got to work on getting the Ruby exclusive Seedot, along with enough other Pokemon to migrate it to Heart Gold for the Leaf Stone evolution. And so, after choosing my 6 to transfer... oh no. So, when I saw this I was concerned, to say the least. I did go back in and the save file was completely gone. However, since this series has become so precious to me, I actually took a backup of my Heart Gold save before doing anything requiring cross connections, such as Pal Park. As a result, I didn't lose anything. However, I did need to procure a new copy of Ruby. As it turns out, I had a UK Ruby and a US Heart Gold, which apparently can't mix because Nintendo hadn't quite figured that out back then. And so, on my fresh new save, I didn't call myself Tom because I think that was what caused the issues. Sorry Tom, but you gotta face the facts. Anyway, catching Seedot and some other randoms again, this time the migration was a success, and after that debacle was over, Seedot evolved into Nuzleaf and then into Shiftry with a Leaf Stone. And staying in Heart Gold, I headbutted this tree in Cherry Grove City, which gave me a Tailo, and I evolved this quickly into Swellow, saving me time on grinding in Ruby and Sapphire. Wingull was next, unfortunately not an easy catch in Johto as it's a Swarm exclusive, so I therefore needed to train it up. However, I also felt like I needed to start progressing in the story a bit, so I entered the Oceanic Museum and fought off Team Aqua. Heading to Route 110, I came across a speedrunner's demise, but I won really easily because of the amount of levelling I've done. In Mauville City, I entered this random unmarked house to get the HM for Rock Smash, and then after that, I got the Mac bike from the bike shop. Wally was stopping me from entering the gym, so I gave him a beat down, making him run away, and his uncle thanked me for it. In the gym itself, I did the incredibly difficult switch puzzle, and due to Marshtomp having a ground move, the Watson battle was over before it had even begun, netting me the badge. Before heading too far north, I took on the Winstraight family, and after defeating all 4 of them in turn, I got the Macho Brace, which I don't think I ever actually used. I went to Route 117 and defeated every trainer there for more XP for Wingull, and entered the east entrance to Ruster Tunnel, smashing this rock this karate guy could have easily climbed over, but it resulted in me getting the HM for Strength. After some more battles, Wingull finally evolved into Pelipper. Then it was Ralts next, which is a rare 5% fine on Route 103. This low encounter rate, coupled with how low level it comes at, meant this was just one of a large number of horrendously long grinds this game has to offer, as it is very stingy when it comes to catching second form evolutions, with Kirlia being one of many examples. It did eventually appear, and I caught it in a Premier Ball just because I can. Sparing you the details of the grinds, basically they were long, hard, and not particularly fun to watch. But eventually it evolved into Kirlia and then into Gardevoir. Next up was Surskit, which has a 1% chance of being found in multiple different locations. This took me about 10 minutes of running around to find, and then after this I just decided to progress the story and let it level up naturally. I also beat the reporters and gave a very appropriate response to their question. Using Surskit in the upcoming battles, I made my way up to the entrance to Mount Chimney, which is currently blocked by Aqua Grunts. Got through the fiery path, and out the other side where I watched my interview on TV. In the ashy Route 113, I got past the hordes of ninjas and spindas and reached Falarbor town. I beat a few more trainers, and Surskit evolved into Masquerain. Back in Soul Silver, I headbutted trees in Verdian Forest until I found Shroomish, which is more common than it is in Heart Gold, and of course with access to high level battles it was no problem to evolve it into Breloom. Sticking with the headbutting, I did the same in Route 25 to catch a Slackoth, which is much rarer in Hoenn. Taking it through the E4 a bunch of times, I evolved into Vigoroth and then eventually into Slacking. Nincada was next, and due to the nature of this challenge I decided I would need 2 of them. The first was evolved into Ninjask with a full party, and the second was evolved into Ninjask with a spare slot, which was then filled by Shedinja. Returning to Johto, and once you get the National Dex in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, there are 2 radio stations that start playing, Hoenn Sound and Sinnoh Sound, that play on Wednesdays and Thursdays respectively, with Hoenn Sound making certain Gen 3 Pokemon appear in the wild. So, as it had become Wednesday, it was time to get to work. No, not looking for Linen. I found what I was looking for, Whismur. And since it was already at a high level, after catching it I quickly leveled it twice, evolving it into Loudred and then into Exploud. Doing the same thing in the same location, I then caught Makuhita, and after 1 level it evolved into Hariyama. Withdrawing the Azumarill I sent to Heart Gold a while back, holding a Sea Incense, I put it into the daycare centre with Ditto, running around for a while until they gave me an egg, which hatched into Azurill. Entering Meteor Falls and Sapphire, I ran into Team Aqua who were planning to do some bad stuff at Mount Chimney involving a stolen meteorite, and it was up to me for some reason to do something about it. So, heading into the cable car, I rode up the mountain and reached the summit. Up there I fought off all the Aqua members, including the admin Matt, and upon reaching Archie and sweeping his team aside, he surrendered the meteorite and all was well in the world. I then headed south through the jagged pass and exited out into Laveridge Town. Talking to this old lady, I was given an egg which I absolutely cannot hatch yet, unless I want this run to be ruined, and then entered the gym. And after doing all the silly puzzles, I fought against Flannery, who went down with not too many problems. After getting the badge, upon leaving I am accosted by Brendan, who gives me the Go Goggles, allowing me to explore the desert. In the northeastern corner there were 2 fossils, and I decided to take the root fossil, making a note to remember to pick up the claw fossil in Ruby. Returning to Granite Cave for the first time in a while, I smashed rocks for a long time until Nosepass showed itself, which I promptly caught. Next was Petalburg Gym, and so after fighting through the various doors and winning battles with people who all had 1 Pokemon and are somehow allowed to be called gym trainers, I reached Norman, and his Slacking Vigoroth Slacking combo was no match at all for Gardevoir, going down easily. After that, entering Wally's house and talking to his dad results in me getting the HM for Surf. which then unlocked a side quest with Watson in which he sends me to New Mauville to turn off a generator. Surfing on over there, I went inside, unlocked the door with the basement key, made my way over to the generator, turning it off and getting the TM for Thunderbolt as a reward. I then gave it to Gardevoir, which would be a very good decision in the long run. Back in Meteor Falls, now that Team Aqua was gone, I could do a bit of exploring, finding a Moonstone. Then in Route 116 I had to find another 1% encounter, Skitty, which appeared within seconds, which was a relief because I expected this to take forever. As soon as I caught it, I used the recently found Moonstone to evolve it into Delcatty. Yet again, re-entering my favourite spot, in Granite Cave I found the Sapphire exclusive Sableye. After catching that, I hopped back over to Ruby, where all the Pokemon I had caught were now sitting in Johto. After getting through Petalburg Woods and evolving Torchic into Combuskin, I easily beat Roxanne and headed to Dewford, where I also beat Brawly. In Granite Cave, I then caught the equivalent Ruby exclusive Mawile. And then the final Pokemon not yet caught from this cave, in Sapphire, I caught Aron, and used it extensively throughout many battles and rematches, also giving the interviewers my opinion again. Then I headed to Route 119. But wait, let's pause for a moment. Now you're probably wondering at this point, why are you playing Ruby and Sapphire? I mean, you played the remakes of the last two generations, why not play Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? And yes, while the EXP gain is faster, the graphics are nicer, there are quality of life improvements, and overall they're just simply better, well, there's one huge roadblock that prevents progress from being made in the context of this challenge. You see, in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, where Steven approaches you here, he actually forces you to go to Southern Island against your will, and you get Latias or Latios, game dependent. That's great when you're doing a casual run, but not so great when the last possible Pokemon you can get before stepping foot into this area is Armaldo, number 348, and Latias is number 380. That's a pretty huge jump, one which unfortunately I just simply cannot do. So there you have it, this is the reason why I'm playing the originals and not the remakes. Thanks Game Freak, your generosity almost ruined my challenge run. Anyway, back to the video. Thankfully, in the originals, Steven just says some random dialogue, then leaves, which allowed me to continue on my journey. In the Berry Master's house, I talked to him to get a Kelpsie Berry, and then continued defeating every trainer I saw while Aron was holding the EXP share, and it was going to be a while before I could get it all the way to its fully evolved form. Next up was the Weather Institute, and I was somewhat nervous going in here because of a certain reward you get at the end. Also, after winning a battle, Aron evolved into Lairon. So anyway, after beating up Team Aqua here, the scientist gives me a cast form. Thankfully, with a full party, I can't receive it yet, so we're all good. Winning another rival fight, I received the HM for Fly, which was way too late in the game and I was sick of walking everywhere. I reached Four Tree City, made sure to make a note of this invisible wall for later, and Steven used the Devon scope to reveal a hidden Kecleon. And of course, Kecleon can't be caught yet, so goodbye. I was given the Devon scope and used it to move the Kecleon away from the gym, allowing me to enter. Proving that I have room temperature IQ by failing basic puzzles again, I reached Winona, and thanks to Thunderbolt she was no problem at all. Heading back into the grass to the west, I kept winning battles with Lairon, and after a long time I finally was able to add one more to the collection, getting it all the way to level 42 and evolving it into Aggron, which became a permanent party member. Back to the south again, and I saw this funny looking rock. I made sure to pick these Chesto berries and any other items along the way. Lilycove City now, and I decided to hold off on doing any more battles until I got another Pokemon to use for grinds. It was still Wednesday, but for some reason Meditite appears from Sinnoh Sound instead of Hoenn Sound. Not sure why, but that meant I had to catch it and do the grind here instead. Or wait until Victor Road to catch Medicham, which was not going to happen. Anyway, I beat my rival once again and headed to Mount Pyre with Meditite in the back, gaining EXP. Reached the summit and found out that I was too late and Archie had taken the red orb. Silly guy didn't realise they were a pair though, so I got the blue orb. Beating every trainer I could find around the Lilycove area, but not being allowed to go any further thanks to Wailmer training, I headed to Slateport where Captain Stern was being interviewed. After that, however, his submarine was stolen, and guess which 10-year-old had to go and infiltrate the bad guy's lair? In the Aqua hideout, I of course beat up every Aqua grunt I could find, and also made sure to pick up the Master Ball here, which is very important, as if you don't get it here, it'll be gone forever once you beat the admin here. And speaking of the admin, I did indeed beat him, but he was just a distraction so that Archie could get away with the submarine. Heading across the sea for easy experience, I eventually landed in Moss Deep City. While there, I made sure to pay Stephen a visit so I could receive the HM for Dive. I then headed into the gym, and after beating all the trainers and completing all the puzzles, I reached the leaders, Tate and Liza. And after knocking out their entire team of Lunato and Solrock in 2 turns, I got the badge and headed out. I then looked at this white rock. Cool. Winning a few more battles out at sea, Meditite evolved into Medicham, and I was able to take a well-deserved rest from grinding. Instead, I was able to focus once again on the catching. I started with Electric, and once that was caught I did the same to Manectric instead of having to evolve it. I was very stubborn about not switching here apparently. Then I caught Plusle, but the next one was extremely rare in Sapphire, so I moved back to Ruby. I handed in the letter and headed straight to Route 110 to find Minun, which is more common in Ruby. Back in Sapphire, I then caught Volbeat, which is rare in Ruby, and then after taking down Team Magma, who are evil in the Ruby universe, I then caught Illumise, however you pronounce it, which is rare in Sapphire. After that, I went ahead and beat Watson, reaching the area south of Fallarbor Town and moved back over to Sapphire. I caught Gulpin under Cycling Road, trained it on rematch trainers and got it to level 26, evolving it into Swalot. I then realised I never actually picked up any rods, so I got the old rod in Dewford Town and the super rod in Moss Deep City. Going fishing in various locations, I caught myself Carvana, then Sharpedo, then Whalmer. Using Dive, I emerged into Sutopolis City, though I had no business here, just wanted to unlock it for flying here later. Diving underwater at Route 128, I entered the seafloor cavern. It took forever and nothing exciting happened, so I'll just cut straight to me picking up the Earthquake TM and giving it to Aggron. I reached the deepest chamber and Archie showed up, and after beating him he attempted to use the wrong coloured orb to summon Kyogre, who didn't appreciate this treatment, disappearing from sight. Maxie showed up, explained some science, and we went outside to find out that there was a torrential downpour occurring, with Archie learning that flooding the earth wasn't a good idea. Before saving the world, I battered a seagull so that Whalmer could level up, evolving it into Wailord. And I used my favourite feature from this Pokédex to compare its size to my character. It had been a productive Wednesday for sure, and after 9 hours it was time to return to the DS. Numel was next, and I decided to catch it using Hoenn Sound, and after a horrendously long grind it evolved into Camerupt. A quick detour back to Sapphire, and Fire Path I caught Torkoal, and then headed back to Heart Gold for Spoink. In hindsight, it genuinely may have been faster evolving it in Sapphire, but I got it done regardless. I then caught Spinda, and then the next one, Trapinch, was once again a long grind. So long in fact that I just decided it was time to complete the rest of the game. I headed to Sutopolis City to put an end to the rain, and so was granted access to the Cave of Origin. Once reaching the basement, it was time to, for the second video in a row, knock out a legendary that would have been very useful in beating the champion. This of course was because its number is much later in the Pokédex than what I'm currently at. The mechanic of legendaries respawning later doesn't actually exist yet though, so Kyogre is gone forever. Until I catch it in a different game. Now that the entire Earth is no longer going to be 100% water, I entered Sutopolis Gym to face off against Wallace. The punishment for failing the puzzle is having to fight the gym trainers, but Trapinch needed that sweet experience, so I'm not complaining. Also, just a side note, but I completed the puzzle in one motion without stopping once, so speedrunners better beware because I'm coming for your top spot. Oh, and also I tore through Wallace's team with super effective moves. After getting the last badge, I left and headed towards Evergrande City and climbed up the waterfall. But I didn't go to the lake just yet. I wanted first to beat every trainer I could find to the west, and also discovered Pacifidlog Town for easy flying later. Actually going to Victory Road now, and it was not too much of a difficult task. Most of my team members were at reasonably good levels, including Trapinch, who managed to finally evolve into Vibrava. Also fun fact, this guy here is the Windstreak family's son, and by beating him I destroyed his confidence, which is hilarious. Oh, and speaking of destroying people's confidence, Wally approaches me right before the exit and I once again steamrolled him. Now I could finally leave and enter the Pokemon League. I was actually not prepared at all. Without the uber legendary Kyogre here to sweep everything, it was going to be a tough one. The first of the Elite Four, Sydney, with his dark types I have no counter for, went down due to brute force more than anything. Phoebe was next, and although I have crunch, I hadn't actually stocked up on healing, so I lost pretty quickly. I then restocked and did some grinding in Victory Road. I knew a certain new team member would help me greatly, and that was of course Flygon, which I had finally got my hands on after the grind was over. I gave it a few rare candies for overkill and beat Sydney and Phoebe easily. Glacia went down with slightly less ease, and Drake was a lot harder than the rest, but most of his team got beaten thanks to Dragon Breath on Flygon, with Gardevoir picking up the rest of the slack. Entering the final chamber, it was time to fight Steven at long last. And let me tell you, at the levels I had, it was actually pretty easy. I ended up winning without any of my Pokemon fainting. So after beating Steven, I was crowned champion, registering my amazing team in the Hall of Fame with a time of... oh dear. 67 hours and 20 minutes. Heading home after this, I'm given the SS ticket and told about a mysterious red flying Pokemon, neither of which will actually be relevant to me. What is relevant though is catching Cacnea. After doing so, I took it with me while grinding through various stragglers that I missed during the main story, evolving it into Cacturn. Then there was Swablu, an easy catch, and its evolution would not be so easy. Fortunately, to the north of Pacifidlog there's a cool little place called Sky Pillar, and on the 6th floor there's a 7% chance of finding a wild Altaria. After searching for a grand total of 20 seconds, I found one and caught it. Oh, we're back in Ruby. It's been a while. Now, you've probably been wondering throughout this entire video, why are you not playing Emerald? You're playing the clearly inferior versions of the game. I mean, I know that you're not playing the remakes due to the Steven roadblock, but Emerald is just so much better, so why? Please, enlighten us. Well, my wise, inquisitive, handsome viewers, Emerald is indeed better, but unfortunately it has multiple Pokemon missing that mean that if I wanted to play Emerald, I'd still have to play Ruby and Sapphire anyway. Surskit, Meditite and Roselia are missing, but along with that there's the two biggest irritations, which are Zangoose and Lunatone. So yes, say hello to Zangoose, who can only ever be obtained in Ruby and no other Gen 3 game. Very unfortunate. Sliding back into Sapphire, I caught Seviper in the same location and headed into Meteor Falls to catch Lunatone, which can only be found in Sapphire and nowhere else. And then I ignored everything that Team Magma just said in Ruby because I'm only interested in finding Solrock. And after catching it, I ditched Ruby forever. Yeah, that sounds like a you problem. In the main timeline, I went fishing in Meteor Falls for Barboach. And I was originally planning on catching a wild Whiscash as well, but Barboach only needed one level up to evolve, so I did that instead. Heading on over to Petalburg City, a rod in hand once more, I caught the amazing, incredible Corphish. And once caught, I trained it up a little bit and evolved it into my favourite Pokemon of all time, Crawdaunt. Shout out to all three of the other people who share this opinion. Then back in the desert, I caught Baltoy, and thanks to Sky Pillar there was no levelling required, instead catching a wild Claydol. Now, I had picked up the root fossil in Sapphire, but because I simply just don't want to keep playing Ruby, I instead headed to Cliff Cave in Soul Silver and used Rock Smash until I eventually found the fossil. I brought it to the Pewter Museum where they resurrected it into Lileep. I then followed my usual routine, trouncing the Elite Four and Mount Silver Pokemon enough times to get it to level 40 to evolve it into Cradily. Repeating this process in Heart Gold with the Claw fossil, I brought this to the museum to get Anorith and did another few E4 runs to evolve it into Armaldo. And now we come to the part of the run I was dreading the most. A lot of you will be familiar with the absolute horror that is catching Feebas in these games. However, I will do a brief summary of just how frustrating this can be. The only place in which you can obtain Feebas is Route 119, and you can do so by fishing. It has a 50% chance of being fished up, if you fish in a Feebas tile. There are an amount of water tiles on this route, roughly 400. However, only 6 of these tiles can actually obtain Feebas. There is no way at all to know which 6 tiles you have Feebas on. People have data mined it, and it is not linked to your ID number or any other identifier you can check. The only way to know is to fish. and so this is one of the absolute rarest wild Pokemon you can ever find, maybe second only to catching a Munchlax in Gen 4. Now obviously some people might want to suggest using another game, but trust me, I've done the research. It doesn't appear anywhere in Fire Red and Leaf Green. It can only be obtained in the Pokewalker and Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and Lord knows I won't be doing that. And yes, it is actually much easier to obtain an Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Incredibly easy actually. Here's me finding it immediately later on in this run. If you fish under this bridge during the day, it is guaranteed to appear. But guess who's standing in the way in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, preventing me from getting into Route 119? So yes, suffice to say, it's pretty difficult. And there's no easy way out here. It has to be done legitimately. Right, enough procrastinating. The sooner it starts, the sooner it ends. I used the old rod for this because any rod will work, and this one has the least amount of resistance when trying to fish. I also used repel to make things less annoying, and my strategy for this hunt is always to start in the southwesternmost corner and make my way north, continuously hooking Magikarp on repeat. I tried each tile once and... oh, well, that was easy. I was in genuine shock when this happened. 3 tiles in out of the 400 plus that I needed to check, and I already found Feebas. I could not believe my luck. I probably beat the world record for the fastest ever Feebas find. But with that, the hardest part of this entire video was actually completed already. I then proceeded to catch a bunch of Feebas, since its nature is important for evolving it. Oh right, did I mention that I have to evolve it as well? Milotic, the second hardest Pokemon to obtain in this video. Although due to my extreme luck, it is actually now the hardest. I'll try to be brief with my explanation, but basically, in order to evolve Feebas, you have to get its beauty contest stat to 170 or higher, then level it up. However, due to some annoying mechanics, it's much harder than it sounds. Getting beauty to 170 requires the use of Pokeblocks, and each contest stat is represented by a colour, with beauty's colour being blue. Therefore, in order to get it to evolve, we need to get a lot of blue coloured berries. Since the battery has run dry, it's impossible to actually grow berries, so I had to make do with what I had. This is why I was pointing out every Chesto berry I picked up, along with that one Kelpsy berry earlier. Chesto berries are perfect for this because they are blue and have the dry flavour, which means that a Feebas with a nature of modest, mild, rash or quiet would be perfect, hence why I caught multiple. If it likes the flavour, its stat will go up more, and therefore I was glad to see that one of the Feebas I caught was a quiet-natured one. I still had more Chesto berries to obtain, needing a total of at least 11. Therefore I gave Thief to my Linoon and started using it on Wild Spinda. They have a 5% chance of holding a Chesto berry, so after about half an hour of doing this on repeat, and then also picking up these ones I had forgotten about, I had enough in my bag. And with all that done, it was time to start berry blending. Oh wait, one sec. Okay, now it's time to start berry blending. Before each blend, I saved the game, then I would chuck a Chesto berry into the machine, try and get as many perfect presses as possible, and if the resulting blue Pokeblock was level 12, it's a success. After making 12 of them, and 1 indigo as well from the Kelpsy berry, I then fed them all to Feebas, indigo first. After a single level up, it evolved into Milotic, and the majority of the difficulty of this part of the challenge was finished. Then it was time for a cleanup of all the Pokemon I ignored, starting with picking up the gift cast form from the Weather Institute. Then catching the Kecleon I left alone earlier using the Devon Scope. Re-entering Mount Pyre, I caught myself a Shuppet, then took a detour to Sky Pillar to catch Bayonet. I then went all the way back to Mount Pyre again for Duskull, though Dusclops doesn't appear in Sapphire, only Ruby, so it was grinding time. And grind I did, eventually evolving it into Dusclops at level 37. Then I caught Tropius in the jungle, and once again climbed back to the top of Mount Pyre to look for the extremely rare Chimecho. After a grand total of 10 seconds, it was mine. After that, I caught Absol, then withdrew the egg from earlier, running around for a while and hatching it into Wynot. Now it's time to reveal why it's perpetually 4 PM. Shoal Cave is affected by tides, meaning that during certain times it is either at low tide or high tide. During low tide, which is between 3 and 9 AM and PM, the secret ice room is available, the only place in the game where you can find Snorunt. So on a game with a dead battery, if you're not on low tide, Snorunt is impossible to obtain. It evolves at level 42, so it was a long grind, but eventually I got it to evolve into Glalie. I headed straight back into Shoal Cave to also catch Spheal, and sparing you the grind, it evolved into Celio and then into Walrein at level 44. Underwater I caught 2 Clamperl, as I need both of its evolutions. The plan was to then migrate them to Johto, as I can get both evolution items in one game, but miraculously it was actually the Swarmer of the Day in Heart Gold as well, meaning I didn't have to potentially corrupt my save file of Pal Park again. So I surfed over to Route 19, catching 2 Clamperl there, and then found the Deep-Sea Scale and the Deep-Sea Tooth. Giving one of each to the Clamperl, I then traded them both into Soul Silver. And I didn't hit record, so here are Huntail and Gorbis. Well done me. Going underwater again, I found the rare Relicanth extraordinarily quickly. My luck in this run has just been absurd. After that, I went to Evergrande City to catch Love Disc by fishing, and making sure that Wailord and Relicanth were in my team, I headed west of Pacifidlog Town and took the correct path through the currents, and I ended up in this patch of deep water. After diving down and reading all the braille at the end, which translates to go up here, I used dive and emerged in the sealed chamber. The next braille says dig here. I picked up the Dig TM from the Fossil Maniac's house, travelled back to the sealed chamber, and with Dig on Flygon I was able to break down the wall. And then the final braille says, first comes Relicanth, last comes Wailord. Putting Relicanth at the start of my team and Wailord at the end, I read it again, and there was a rumbling sound as 3 doors open in the distance. But we can't do anything about that just yet. Instead, heading back to Meteor Falls, I entered the secret back room, finding the TM for Dragonclaw, but more importantly, finding Bagon. Once caught, it would be my final grind within this game, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. It evolved into Shelgon quickly, but the next took so long that I just used a rare candy at the end, evolving it into Salamence. But I wasn't going to do another long-winded evolution process. Instead, I brought my Fortress to Silphco and traded it to Steven for his Beldum. Iron. And after training Iron, it evolved into Metang after a single level, as in-game trade Pokemon before Gen 5 had the same level as the one you trade them. Then at level 45, it evolved into Metagross, and then it was legendary time. In the desert, I entered the newly opened Desert Ruins, and the braille in here says right, down, down, then use strength. And that opened the door and led me to Regirock. This took a very long time, and I used up almost all my Ultra Balls, but I caught it in the end. Next up was Island Cave, north of Dewford Town. The braille in this room says, stop and wait for time to pass twice. 2 minutes of doing nothing later, the door opened and I met Regice. This took a while as well, but wasn't quite as bad as Regirock. Last, but certainly not least, was Ancient Tomb. The braille in here says, with new time, hope and love, aim to the sky in the middle, which just means stand in the middle of the room and use fly. Doing this, the door opens up, and of course we see a Registeel. And I caught it in 1 Ultra Ball. I don't know about you, but I think it's time to start the 3DS era at long last. So yeah, I have to play through both Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire to completion, just for a few Pokemon. Some now, some later. This was not too fun. The games are good, but when you've just done it all, doing it again twice is just horrible. And it's all going to be for 1 Pokemon, at least for now. Doing this right now is going to save me heaps of time in the future, so that's what I'm looking towards. I chose Trico since it got neglected in the main part of this run, and played through the game as per normal, admiring all the pretty 3D graphics along the way. I did everything exactly as I did in Ruby and Sapphire, though of course I had to stop and admire the rocks at Rustboro Gym. Speaking of, yeah, I got to the end, beat Roxanne, evolved Trico and got the Stone Badge. And then I beat Sprawley, and then I entered the new Mauville City, which looks hilarious in this game, because it's just a giant shopping centre. and then I beat Watson, and then I did the Snorefest in Meteor Falls, featuring non-threatening chibi Archie. I beat Maxie at Mount Chimney, evolving Grovyle into Sceptile in the process, did the silly new puzzles at Laveridge Town, beat Flannery for the Heat Badge, and then beat up my dad and got the Balance Badge. And then I did everything I just did, again, but in Alpha Sapphire. I won't bother covering it again, but after getting the 5th badge, the Stephen incident occurred. This led to him dragging me to Southern Island by force without any permission, and even though I tried to leave he would not let me, so I just had to go befriend Latias. After beating up Team Aqua, I was able to get Latias simply by saying hello, along with gaining the ability to Mega Evolve it as well. Then I did that again, but in a Mega Ruby with some colour swaps this time, beating Team Magma and getting Latios. Then I just decided to move Alpha Sapphire further forward. So I beat Winona, and then beat Tate and Liza. Doing C4 Cavern, Kyogre was awakened, except this time I was actually going to be able to catch it. And also it looked cooler in 3D. In the Cave of Origin, I reached the basement, put on the Aqua suit, and rode Kyogre down into the depths. And after that, I was able to catch it. Then the whole world was saved, yada yada, the usual, nothing exciting, nothing unusual. After getting the blue orb, I decided to leave Alpha Sapphire, for now at least, and back on Omega Ruby, I beat Winona and Tate and Liza, then awakened Groudon, entered the Cave of Origin, hopped on its back, and then in battle got its health nice and low and caught it. And the exact same thing played out again. Oh, but we can't be catching Rayquaza in the new games. There's a funky little Pokémon that prevents that from happening seamlessly. So I just simply caught it in Sapphire, with of course, the Master Ball.
This show is brought to you by these sponsors here.
What is going on? I'm genuinely confused as to what Pokemon Channel is. I just know that you can get a Jirachi from it. I don't know if you have to complete the game or if it's just a main menu thing. I hope it's a main menu thing. So yeah, I sat through a whole anime short. I might actually get copyright striked if I play it properly, so here's a Peter Griffin watermark. Anyway, after watching this to completion, I then had to file a report, hoping that the Jirachi event would pop up soon, but then I was told to watch more things to completion, and then play with Pikachu, and yeah, it's... Let's get this out the disc tray immediately. The only other way to get Jirachi without breaking the streak, or just getting it straight from an event, is from the very rare, expensive Colosseum bonus disc. So after buying that, I sent it over to Sapphire, and there it was, my very own Jirachi. I actually do need to finish Omega Ruby now, so I'll just go ahead and get that out of the way next. After watching Wallace do his dramatic intro, I one-shotted his entire team and got the Rain Badge. Ascending to Evergrande City, I powered through Victory Road again, admiring the very lovely scenery, and beat Wally at the end. It was then time to enter the Pokemon League again, with this being the only— ooh, shiny! The only thing standing in the way of me obtaining the last Gen 3 Pokemon. And so I took on the Elite Four, except it was a million times easier because I have Mega Sceptile, Mega Latios, and Primal Groudon on my team. I swept Sydney, Phoebe, Glacia, and even Drake, and then faced up against champion Steven once again. And he was very easy. It does help having that OP Groudon. Entered the Hall of Fame, then after the credits I was greeted with a cutscene from the space centre of a supposed meteorite crash incoming. Then we see a mysterious new character and her Whismur. I just noticed that Whismur has a little bumhole. Somehow never knew about that. Oh yeah, this is the post-game, the Delta episode. So the Delta episode is unbelievably boring. All you do is run about from one location to another, go through dialogue, win a few battles, and at the end you get to see some pretty cool stuff. So I'm just going to summarise it and the backstory as best as I can from memory while you watch this lovely sped up footage. Basically, a meteor is coming from outer space with a character called Zinnia who turns out to be a Draconid, which were a clan of people from ancient times. She's wanting to summon Rayquaza. In order to do that, she needs multiple keystones, hence why she tries to steal the Megastones from the protagonist, May, Wally, and Team Magma. The people in the Space Center are panicking because the meteor will be landing in Hoenn, likely the Sky Pillar. Also, the meteor is actually coming from another parallel universe using a thing called a link cable, which is a fun little quirky reference for us old-timers, and it's also supposed to be a confirmation of a multiverse, but something that's just a theory. What else? Oh yeah, you fight against Wallace because he's the guardian of Sky Pillar, I guess, in this game. Which is why I was not able to go there earlier, and upon climbing up it, Zinnia shows up and tells you lore about the paintings on the wall and summons Rayquaza. And now we're at the present, where the good stuff happens. Zinnia is trying to make Rayquaza Mega Evolve, but can't because she lacks some sort of energy. Or something, I wasn't really paying attention. The protagonist is able to though, thanks to a meteorite in his pocket, and so immediately proceeds to battle it and catch it. And so, with that done, Zinnia goes full Joker mode and wants to fight Mega Rayquaza, which, of course, KOs her entire team immediately, and for that, it's all over. And then my guy does a Fast and Furious 9, getting the idea of driving into space, and upon leaving the atmosphere, Rayquaza flies through the meteor and a big giant triangle pops out, revealing the one and only Deoxys. And this is the only way at all, in any game, to obtain Deoxys without the use of events or other external connections. I made sure to save up the Master Ball for this moment, catching it immediately, and therefore closing this chapter of the story. Thank you very much for watching. Again, I am glad to see people are liking this series, and I am again happy with how this video turned out. A lot more work went into this one than the last two, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks as always to everyone who watched this, and all of the new subscribers and commenters again since posting part 2. I've already started working on part 4, and it will be by far the longest one yet, so please look forward to that. But until then, goodbye, and thanks for watching. The professor's being attacked by a Shroomish, what a silly lad. I mean, if I'm being offered, I'll take Cyndaquil. Makes up for me obliterating that Typhlosion in the last video. Well, thanks for that. Wait, he needs help again? Well, if it means getting another free starter, then... Oh. Yeah, okay, I can't do that yet.